I am Lyle, 32 years old, and a software engineer who just bought my first duplex after years of saving. The pride I felt holding those keys was indescribable. Little did I know, my moment of achievement would soon collide with my family's secret plans. What they had arranged behind my back left me stunned, forcing me to make a decision that would change everything between us. If you're watching this story about family expectations gone wrong, drop a comment about where you're from, and subscribe if you've ever had to stand your ground against family pressure. Growing up in a traditional middle-class family in suburban Chicago, I always knew my place in the family hierarchy. My parents Richard and Margaret raised my older brother Brandon and me with clear expectations. Brandon was always the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, despite his constant financial struggles. I was the reliable one, the son who was expected to make something of himself and then help the family. This dynamic was never explicitly stated, but the signs were there from early on. Brandon is 36, married to Lisa for 12 years, with 3 kids aged 10, 8, and 5. His employment history reads like a list of jobs I quit or got fired from. Construction worker, car salesman, insurance agent, restaurant manager, the list goes on. Each venture began with enthusiastic family support and ended with my parents covering his bills while he found the next big opportunity. Meanwhile, Lisa stayed home with the kids, a decision my parents fully supported despite their perpetual money problems. I took a different path. After college, I landed a solid job at a software company, lived frugally in a small apartment, and focused on building my savings. Every promotion or bonus went straight into my investment account. No fancy cars, designer clothes, or exotic vacations for me. My goal was financial independence, something my brother seemed allergic to. Lyle, can I borrow $200 until payday became Brandon's monthly refrain? Though borrow was a loose term, since repayment rarely materialized. My parents normalized this, insisting that family helps family whenever I expressed frustration. By 32, I had saved enough for a substantial down payment on a property. After researching the real estate market for months, I decided a duplex made the most sense. I could live in one unit and rent the other, essentially having someone else pay half my mortgage. The investment potential was clear, and I felt a surge of excitement when I started viewing properties. I intentionally kept my house hunting secret from my family. Experience had taught me that sharing good financial news often led to unexpected requests for loans or temporary help from Brandon. My parents would inevitably support these requests with emotional appeals about family obligation. This time, I wanted to make my decision without the usual family pressure. After viewing 15 properties, I found the perfect duplex in a quiet neighborhood 20 minutes from my workplace. Built in the 1970s, but recently renovated, it featured 2 nearly identical units, each with 2 bedrooms, 1.5 bathrooms, and separate entrances. The backyard was modest but well-maintained, with a small patio and garden area. At $350,000, it was at the upper end of my budget, but the location and condition justified the price. The closing process was stressful but straightforward. I secured a good interest rate, passed the inspection with minimal issues, and finally, on a sunny Tuesday morning, received the keys to my very first property. Standing alone in the empty living room, I felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. This was mine, earned through years of hard work and discipline. No handouts, no family connections, just persistent effort and smart planning. That evening, I walked through both units, mentally arranging furniture and planning renovations. The upper unit needed fresh paint and new kitchen appliances, while the lower unit was move-in ready with its recent updates. I decided to live in the upper unit despite the needed work, as it had slightly better views and more natural light. As I stood on the small balcony overlooking the neighborhood, I imagined my new life here. Peaceful mornings with coffee, before work weekends spent gradually making improvements, and the satisfaction of building equity while someone else helped pay my mortgage. It was everything I had worked for, a tangible symbol of my independence and financial responsibility. That night, I slept on an air mattress in my empty new bedroom, too excited to wait until my furniture was delivered. The house creaked and settled around me, unfamiliar sounds that would soon become the comfortable soundtrack of home. Before drifting off to sleep, I decided to finally share my news with my family. I would invite them over for dinner that weekend, show them what I had accomplished, and hopefully earn some long overdue recognition for my financial discipline. Little did I know that this decision would unravel a family scheme that had been forming behind my back, one that would test my boundaries and resolve in ways I never anticipated. 3 days after getting my keys, I invited my parents and Brandon's family over for dinner on Saturday. I was genuinely excited to share my achievement with them, naively hoping for congratulations, and perhaps a little admiration for what I had accomplished on my own. I spent Friday evening cleaning the upper unit and buying groceries for a simple but nice dinner. Nothing fancy, just grilled chicken roasted potatoes and a salad plus ice cream for the kids. I even picked up a bottle of champagne to celebrate. When I called with the invitation, my mother sounded oddly hesitant. A duplex. You bought a duplex without telling us. Where exactly is it located? Her tone confused me. I had expected surprise, but this sounded almost like concern or disapproval. Yes, Mom. I wanted it to be a surprise. It is in Oakwood Heights near the community college. Oh, she paused. That is a nice area. And you say it has 2 separate units. Yes, 2 complete apartments. I will be living in the upper unit and renting out the lower one. Another strange pause followed. You are planning to rent it out. To strangers. That is the whole point of buying a duplex, Mom. The rental income helps cover the mortgage. I see, she said, her voice tight. Well, we will certainly come to dinner. What time should we arrive? Something felt off about the conversation, but I brushed it aside, attributing her reaction to surprise, or perhaps a little jealousy that I had achieved this milestone without family help. Saturday evening arrived, and I greeted my family at the door with enthusiasm. My parents arrived first, carrying a small houseplant as a gift. My father gave me a stiff handshake, while my mother offered a quick hug. Neither seemed particularly excited to be there. So this is it, my father said, looking around with an evaluating eye. Seems smaller than I expected. The property actually includes both units, Dad. This is just the upper apartment where I will be living. He nodded without comment and moved to inspect the kitchen. Brandon, Lisa, and their kids arrived 20 minutes late as usual. The children immediately began running through the empty rooms, while Lisa half-heartedly called after them to settle down. Brandon gave me a quick clap on the shoulder. Nice place, little brother. Real nice. Got the whole building, huh? Smart move. His compliment seemed genuine, but something in his expression made me uneasy, like he was mentally measuring the space for something. During dinner, which we ate at a folding table, with chairs I had borrowed from a coworker, the conversation felt strained. My parents asked perfunctory questions about the mortgage and insurance, but showed little interest in how I had saved for the down payment or my plans for renovations. Brandon kept mentioning how the neighborhood would be perfect for the kids and how the nearby school was supposed to be really good. After dessert, the kids asked to play in the backyard, and Lisa went to supervise them. Brandon stepped outside for a cigarette, leaving me alone with my parents. I was clearing plates when I overheard them whispering in the living room. Curiosity got the better of me, and I quietly moved closer to listen. This complicates everything, my father muttered. We already told Brandon they could move in here. He has already given notice at their apartment. My mother sighed. I know Richard. But Lyle mentioned renting the lower unit. Maybe we can convince him to let Brandon and Lisa have it instead. For free, of course. They cannot afford rent right now. But what about the upper unit? Brandon was counting on having both apartments. They need the extra space with 3 kids, and Lyle is just one person. Maybe Lyle could convert the basement into a small apartment for himself. Or we could help him find a cheap studio nearby. He makes good money, he can afford it. I froze, dishes in hand, as the truth dawned on me. They had assumed that when I eventually bought property, it would naturally be shared with Brandon's family. They had made promises on my behalf, without my knowledge or consent. The realization hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. Carefully setting down the plates, I retreated to the kitchen, mind racing. This explained their lukewarm reaction to my news, their strange questions about the rental unit, Brandon's comments about schools and neighborhoods. They had been planning this all along, counting on my usual acquiescence to family demands. I took several deep breaths, trying to process this betrayal. All my hard work, my years of saving, while Brandon frittered away every paycheck, My careful planning and research, all of it, meant nothing to them. In their minds, my achievement was simply an opportunity for Brandon to once again be rescued from his financial irresponsibility. The basement comment particularly stung. My mother had casually suggested I give up both apartments in my own property and live in an unfinished basement or move out entirely, all so Brandon's family could have a free place to live. The sheer entitlement of it left me speechless. When Brandon returned from his cigarette, I noticed him eyeing the closet space in the hallway with an assessing look. "This would be perfect for the kids' winter coats," he said, as if his family moving in was already a done deal. I maintained my composure through the remainder of the evening, nodding and smiling on autopilot, while inwardly reeling from what I had discovered. As they prepared to leave, Brandon pulled me aside. "Hey, we should talk soon about some ideas I have for this place. Maybe grab a beer next week." I nodded noncommittally, suddenly understanding what those ideas would entail. My mother hugged me goodbye with unusual warmth. "We are so proud of you, Lyle. This place is a real blessing for the family." For the family. Not for me, the one who had worked and saved for years. For the family, which in practice always meant Brandon. After they left, I sat alone in my empty living room, the magnitude of their expectations crushing down on me. They had not seen my duplex purchase as my achievement, but as their solution, a convenient answer to Brandon's latest housing crisis. My role was simply to provide, to sacrifice, to step aside. In that moment, something hardened inside me. A lifetime of putting family first, of being the responsible one, while watching Brandon receive endless support for his irresponsibility, crystallized into a firm resolve. This was my home, purchased with my money, and I would not be manipulated out of it even by my own family. I decided then that I would not confront them directly. Years of family dynamics had taught me that direct confrontation would only lead to emotional manipulation and guilt. Instead, I would take action in my own way, quietly, but definitively establishing boundaries they had never respected. As I cleaned up the dinner dishes, I began to formulate a plan, one that would protect my investment and my independence, while sending a clear message about my newfound boundaries. They had underestimated me for the last time. In the days following the dinner, the frequency of family contact increased suspiciously. My mother called nearly every day, ostensibly, to check on my settling-in process, but inevitably steering the conversation toward how I planned to use both units. "Have you thought about furniture for the lower apartment?" she asked casually during one call. "No need to buy anything new. We have that old sectional in the garage, and Brandon has a spare bedroom set they are not using." I gave non-committal answers, neither confirming nor denying any plans which seemed to frustrate her. My father took a more direct approach, calling to offer his help with property management. "Rental tenants can be a real headache, son," he warned. "Background checks, security deposits, lease agreements. It is a lot to handle while working full-time. Maybe you should consider alternatives." When I asked what alternatives he suggested, he cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Well, family is always more reliable than strangers. Brandon has been looking for a new place, as you know. Their landlord raised the rent again, and with 3 kids, they are struggling." I simply replied that I was still figuring things out, and would keep that in mind, which clearly wasn't the enthusiastic agreement he had expected. Brandon's approach was the most transparent. He texted, asking for my new address to update his contact list, then began sending links to schools in my neighborhood. "Jackson really likes the look of Monroe Elementary," he wrote. "Just 5 blocks from your place. Perfect walking distance." Then came the request I had been expecting. "Lisa and I were thinking we might come check out your new place this weekend. Maybe stay over a night or two to get a feel for the neighborhood. The kids are excited to see Uncle Lyle's new house." I deflected with a work excuse, claiming a major project deadline that would keep me busy all weekend. The disappointed reply came quickly. "No worries, bro. Rain check for next weekend." The pressure continued to mount. My mother called with exciting news that she had found some perfect curtains for the kids' rooms at a department store sale. My father mentioned that Brandon's landlord was causing problems, and they might need to move out sooner than expected. The most revealing moment came during a Sunday family dinner at my parents' house, which I attended only because refusing would have raised suspicions. Brandon's oldest child, Jackson, approached me with innocent excitement. "Dad says, we are moving to your house soon. I get to have the blue bedroom, and Emma gets the small one because she is younger. I glanced across the room to see Brandon frantically shushing his son, while my parents suddenly became very interested in serving dessert. The audacity was breathtaking. They had already discussed bedroom assignments with the children, without ever having an actual conversation with me about any of this. After dinner, I called my best friend Kevin to vent my frustration and seek advice. Kevin had known my family dynamics for years and understood the situation immediately. "They have always treated you like the family bank," he said bluntly. "But this is next-level entitlement. They are literally trying to take your house." I know, I sighed. The worst part is, they do not even see anything wrong with it. In their minds, my success is family property, while Brandon's failures are individual misfortunes that everyone should help fix. "So what are you going to do?" "Tell them off." I considered this option, but knew from experience that direct confrontation would only lead to emotional manipulation, tears from my mother, anger from my father, and Brandon playing the victim about his children's needs. "No," I replied finally. "I am going to set boundaries through actions, not words. They never listen to what I say anyway." Kevin agreed this was probably the wisest approach given my family's history of steamrolling my objections. That evening, I received a revealing text from my cousin Rachel. "Just heard from Aunt Margaret about Brandon moving into your duplex. So generous of you to help them out like that. Let me know if you need help with moving furniture." So they were already announcing it to the extended family, positioning me as the generous brother offering housing, rather than the son being manipulated out of his own property. The more I discovered about their scheme, the more determined I became to thwart it. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I ran into Lisa's sister Andrea at the grocery store. After an awkward greeting, she mentioned that Brandon and Lisa were so relieved about the new living arrangement. "They have been 3 months behind on rent," she confided. "The landlord was about to evict them. Your parents said you would cover the back rent too, once they move in with you." Such a lifesaver for them. I nodded politely while internally reeling from this new information. Not only had my family planned to take over my duplex without my consent, but they had also volunteered my finances to clear Brandon's debts. The audacity was stunning. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with a text from Brandon. "Hey bro, good news. We can move in next Saturday. Dad and I will rent a truck. No need for you to do anything. We got it covered." They had not even bothered to ask. In their minds, my agreement was a foregone conclusion my compliance assumed. Saturday was just 5 days away. The time for action had arrived sooner than I expected, but I was ready. My plan, formulated over sleepless nights and anxious days, would now be put into motion. They had pushed too far, assumed too much, and were about to discover that the reliable, acquiescent Lyle they thought they knew had finally reached his breaking point. That evening, I sat at my kitchen counter with a legal pad and mapped out my strategy. Time was of the essence now that Brandon had set a move-in date without my agreement. First, I needed to secure both units legally, before they attempted to insert themselves into my property. Early the next morning, I called in sick, to work for the first time in 3 years. This warranted my full attention. My first step was contacting a property management company I had researched during my house hunting process. I explained my situation, omitting the family drama, and scheduled an immediate meeting. The property manager, Janet, arrived that afternoon to assess both units. She was impressed with the condition of the property, and confident she could find quality tenants quickly. "The rental market is tight right now," she explained. "A well-maintained duplex in this neighborhood could be rented within days, especially the lower unit, which is already in move-in condition." I signed the management agreement on the spot, authorizing Janet to begin advertising the lower unit immediately. For the upper unit where I had planned to live, I decided on a different approach. Over the next 3 days, I worked tirelessly to prepare both apartments. I hired professional cleaners for a deep clean of both units, scheduled minor repairs I had noticed during the inspection, and even paid extra for priority installation of new appliances in the upper kitchen. Every dollar spent was an investment in my independence. Meanwhile, Janet had begun showing the lower unit to prospective tenants. By Wednesday, just 3 days after our initial meeting, she had multiple applications. I reviewed them carefully, looking for the most stable, long-term option. A young married couple, both elementary school teachers, with excellent credit and solid references, seemed perfect. They were expecting their first child and looking for a family-friendly neighborhood. I approved their application immediately. For the upper unit, I took a different approach. While still working with Janet, I specified that I wanted a professional tenant, preferably someone with a demanding career who would travel frequently. This would give me more flexibility with my own living situation as I implemented the next phase of my plan. By Thursday, Janet had found an ideal candidate for the upper unit, Thomas, a third-year medical resident specializing in emergency medicine. His rotating shifts and on-call schedule meant he needed a quiet, convenient place to rest between hospital duties. His credit was impeccable, and his hospital position guaranteed stable income. Most importantly, his demanding schedule meant he would often be absent, giving me the privacy I would need. I signed one-year leases, with both tenants with move-in dates set for Friday, just one day before Brandon's self-appointed moving day. The teachers would take the lower unit as originally planned, while Thomas would legally occupy the upper unit, though, with an unofficial arrangement that gave me access to one bedroom and shared use of the common areas when he was working overnight shifts, which was often. This arrangement was unusual but advantageous for both of us. Thomas got a significant discount on rent in exchange for sharing the space part-time with the property owner, while I maintained legal occupancy of my property without having to completely give up living there. We formalized this arrangement with a written agreement separate from the standard lease, protecting both our interests. With the leases signed and deposits collected, I quickly had the locks changed on both units and provided keys only to the new tenants and the property management company. I moved my air mattress and essential belongings into the bedroom we had designated as mine in the upper unit and helped the teachers move some advance items into the lower unit to establish their presence. Throughout this whirlwind of activity, I maintained radio silence with my family. My mother left increasingly concerned voicemails about not being able to reach me. My father sent terse texts about important family matters we needed to discuss. Brandon alternated between casual messages about moving logistics and pointed questions about why I was not responding. I read everything but replied to nothing, focusing instead on securing my property. By Friday afternoon, both units were officially rented and occupied. The teachers, Michael and Sarah, had moved their furniture into the lower unit and were busy arranging their new home. Thomas had dropped off his belongings in the upper unit before heading to the hospital for a 36-hour shift, leaving me temporarily alone in what was now legally his apartment with my designated room clearly established. That evening, I received a final text from Brandon Truck Rental, confirmed for tomorrow at 8 a.m. Should be at your place around 10. Kids are super excited. I did not reply, but I was ready. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation I had been avoiding my entire adult life, but for the first time, I felt prepared. The property was legally protected, my boundaries clearly established through actions rather than easily ignored words. Whatever emotional manipulation they attempted would crash against the immovable reality of signed leases and occupied units. As I settled into my bedroom in the upper unit, listening to the muffled sounds of Michael and Sarah unpacking downstairs, I felt a strange mixture of anxiety and relief. The anxiety came from anticipating the family conflict ahead, but the relief stemmed from finally taking control of my own life, from refusing to be the perpetual solution to Brandon's problems. I slept surprisingly well that night, perhaps because for the first time, I had chosen myself over the dysfunctional family system that had constrained me for so long. Tomorrow would be difficult, even painful, but it would also be the beginning of a new chapter 1, where I set the terms of my own life. Saturday morning arrived with perfect autumn weather sunshine filtering through the trees lining my street. I had been awake since dawn, too anxious to sleep, rehearsing what I would say when my family arrived. At 9:30, I heard car doors slamming outside and looked through the blinds to see my parents pulling into the driveway. My father carried a small housewarming gift, while my mother clutched her purse tightly, her expression tense. They were early, presumably, to help prepare for Brandon's arrival. I took a deep breath and went downstairs to meet them outside, deliberately standing on the front walkway rather than inviting them in. Their confusion was immediate. "Lyle, why are there cars in both driveways?" my mother asked, peering around me at the unfamiliar vehicles. Before I could respond, the front door of the lower unit opened, and Sarah stepped out with a friendly wave. "Good morning," You must be Lyle's family. I am Sarah. We are the new tenants. We just moved in yesterday. The shock on my parents' faces would have been comical under different circumstances. My father recovered first, his expression darkening as he turned to me. Tenants. What is the meaning of this? Lyle. We need to talk. Privately. I stood my ground, keeping my voice calm and level. There is nothing to discuss. I purchased this property as an investment. Both units are now rented to tenants with signed 1-year leases. My mother's face crumpled. But what about Brandon? Where will they live? You knew they were counting on moving in today. I never agreed to that arrangement, I replied firmly. That was a plan you made without consulting me about my property that I purchased with my own money. Our tense standoff was interrupted by the rumbling of a large rental truck turning onto our street. Brandon was at the wheel with Lisa beside him, and the kids visible in the back seat of the attached cab. The truck slowed as it approached Brandon's confusion. Evident as he took in the scene, our parents standing on the walkway, the unfamiliar cars in both driveways, and me, standing with arms crossed, clearly not welcoming their arrival. The truck stopped haphazardly at the curb, and Brandon jumped out, striding toward us with growing anger. What is going on? Why are there other people's cars here? My father turned to him, his voice tight with suppressed rage. Your brother has rented both units to strangers, without telling any of us. Brandon's face flushed red. That is impossible. We already gave notice at our apartment. We have nowhere to go. Sarah had retreated inside, clearly uncomfortable with the family drama unfolding on her new doorstep. Meanwhile, the upper unit door opened, and Thomas emerged in scrubs heading to his car for his shift. He nodded politely at the gathered group before driving away, unaware of the significance of his presence. Brandon watched Thomas leave, then turned to me, his voice rising. You gave our home to some random guy. What about family, Lyle? What about my kids? I maintained my composure, though my heart was pounding. This was never your home, Brandon. It is my property purchased with my money, and I get to decide how to use it. You selfish piece of garbage, he spat. After everything this family has done for you. What exactly has the family done for me, Brandon? I asked quietly. I put myself through college with scholarships and part-time jobs. I saved for this down payment while you were borrowing money from mom and dad every month. I have been completely independent since I was 18, while you have relied on family bailouts your entire adult life. My mother began to cry, while my father placed a restraining hand on Brandon's arm, as he took a threatening step toward me. We are your family, my mother sobbed. Family helps family. How could you do this to your brother's children? I am not doing anything to anyone, I replied. I am simply using my property as I see fit, the same as any homeowner would. The real question is, how could you make promises about my property without my knowledge or consent? How could you tell Brandon he could live here when you never even asked me? Brandon jerked away from our father's grip, his face contorted with rage. We would have done the same for you. If I had bought a house, I would have shared it. The absurdity of this statement almost made me laugh. But you did not buy a house, did you, Brandon? You have never saved enough for even 1 month's security deposit, let alone a down payment. You do not get to claim generosity with assets you do not have and never worked for. The situation escalated rapidly. Brandon began shouting obscenities, threatening to take what was promised, and claiming he would consult a lawyer about his rights. My father alternated between attempts to calm Brandon and angry accusations that I had betrayed the family. My mother simply wept, repeating that she did not raise me to be so heartless. Lisa had remained in the truck with the children, but now she approached cautiously, her expression a mixture of anger and embarrassment. What are we supposed to do now? She demanded. We have nowhere to go. The landlord already rented our apartment to someone else. That is not my problem, I said firmly. Your housing situation is your responsibility, not mine. Perhaps if Brandon kept a job for more than 6 months, or if you got a job yourself, instead of relying on everyone else to support your family, you would not be in this position. Lisa's face hardened. How dare you? I am raising 3 children. So are millions of working mothers, I replied. That is a choice, not an excuse to live off others. The confrontation had drawn attention, Several neighbors had come out to watch the unfolding drama, and Michael had joined Sarah at their window, clearly concerned about the shouting. Most worryingly, Brandon's children had left the truck and were standing on the sidewalk witnessing their father's rage and their grandmother's tears with confused expressions. Brandon noticed the audience and became even more agitated. "I am not leaving. This was promised to us. You cannot do this." He strode toward the lower unit door, apparently intending to force his way in, but Michael had anticipated this and locked the door. Brandon began pounding on it, shouting that this was supposed to be his home. The situation had spiraled beyond reason. Michael, visibly alarmed, called out through the window that he was calling the police if Brandon did not stop trying to enter their home. This threat only enraged Brandon further, and he began kicking the door while screaming obscenities. My father finally intervened physically, pulling Brandon away from the door with the help of Lisa, who seemed to have realized the futility and embarrassment of their position. The children were crying now, frightened by the adults' behavior and the public spectacle. "Get back in the truck," Brandon, my father, ordered. "This is not helping anything." "Where are we supposed to go?" Brandon demanded, still struggling against our father's grip. "You can stay with us until we figure something out," my father said, shooting me a look of pure disgust. "Since your brother has made his priorities clear." As they tried to corral Brandon back toward the truck, a police cruiser turned onto the street, likely called by one of the concerned neighbors. The officer approached cautiously, taking in the rental truck, the emotional family grouping, and the obvious tension. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, hand resting casually near his belt. "No problem, officer," I replied quickly. "My family was just leaving." "The hell we are." Brandon started, but Lisa grabbed his arm and whispered something urgent in his ear, nodding toward the children and the police officer. The officer looked between us. "Does someone want to explain what is happening here?" My father stepped forward, attempting to salvage some dignity from the situation. "Just a family misunderstanding about a property. We are leaving now." "Is this your property, sir?" the officer asked me. "Yes, it is. I purchased it recently, and both units are rented to tenants who moved in yesterday. My family arrived expecting different arrangements that were never agreed upon." The officer nodded, understanding the situation. "I suggest the rest of you leave the premises if you do not live here. Family disputes are best handled in private, not on the street." My mother, still crying, allowed my father to guide her back to their car. Lisa herded the children back to the truck, while Brandon stood his ground for a moment longer, staring at me with naked hatred. "This is not over," he said quietly. "You will regret this." "Get in the truck," Lisa called, her voice cracking with emotion. "The kids are scared." Finally, he turned away, stomping back to the rental truck and slamming the door with such force that the entire vehicle shook. The officer remained present as my parents' car and Brandon's truck pulled away, ensuring that the situation did not escalate further. As they disappeared down the street, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief that the confrontation was over, guilt over the children's distress, anger at my family's entitlement, and a profound sadness for relationships that might never recover from this day. The officer approached me one last time. "Everything okay now, sir?" I nodded, suddenly exhausted. "Yes. Thank you." "Family property disputes can get ugly," he commented. "You might want to consider getting a restraining order if you feel threatened." After he left, I stood alone on the sidewalk, watched by curious neighbors and my concerned tenants. The beautiful autumn day continued around me, indifferent to the family explosion that had just occurred. I had held my ground, protected my investment, and for the first time in my life, prioritized my own needs over my family's demands. The cost had been high, but as I walked back to the upper unit apartment that I now shared with Thomas, I knew I had done what was necessary, not just for my financial security, but for my self-respect. The immediate aftermath of the confrontation was a deafening silence from my family, followed by an overwhelming barrage of messages. My phone filled with texts from extended family members. I rarely spoke to cousins and aunts expressing their disappointment in how I had treated Brandon. Most of them had only heard a one-sided version of events, carefully crafted to position me as the villain. "How could you leave your brother homeless?" wrote my Aunt Susan. "Those poor children thinking they had a home, and then having it ripped away," texted my cousin Mark. Even old family friends reached out their messages dripping with judgment and thinly veiled accusations. My mother had clearly been working the phone lines, spreading her version of the story far and wide. Brandon himself oscillated between rage and manipulation. One day I would receive threatening texts about making me pay for what I had done, and the next he would send photos of his children looking sad in my parents' crowded guest room, with captions like, "Thanks to Uncle Lyle. This is our bedroom now." My father's approach was colder, more calculated. He sent a single email outlining all the ways I had betrayed family values and abandoned my responsibilities. He concluded with the statement that until I made things right, I should consider myself unwelcome at family gatherings. My mother's tactics were perhaps the most difficult to endure. She called daily, leaving voicemails filled with tears and emotional appeals. "I did not raise you to be so heartless," she would sob. "What did we do wrong that you would turn your back on your own brother?" I listened to each message, read every text and email, but responded to none of them. Each communication only reinforced my conviction that I had made the right decision. Their reactions proved that they viewed me not as an individual with my own life and goals, but as a resource to be used for Brandon's benefit. The stress took its toll. I had trouble sleeping, lost my appetite, and found it difficult to concentrate at work. After 2 weeks of this, I recognized that I needed help processing the situation and found a therapist who specialized in family dynamics. Dr. Wilson listened to my story without judgment, then offered a perspective that resonated deeply. "What you are describing is a family system that designated you as the responsible one and your brother as the needy one. These roles became so entrenched that when you acted outside your assigned role, the entire system reacted with hostility to force you back into it." Over several sessions, we explored my feelings of guilt and obligation, working through the complex emotions triggered by standing up to my family for the first time. Dr. Wilson helped me understand that healthy families encourage independence and respect boundaries rather than punishing members who assert them. "Your purchase of the duplex was a significant step toward financial security," she noted. Their attempt to co-opt it was not about love or family unity, but about maintaining the dysfunctional system that keeps your brother dependent and you in the role of provider. With her guidance, I began to establish clearer boundaries, starting with simple steps like setting specific times when I would check family messages rather than allowing their communications to interrupt my day. I drafted responses to the most egregious accusations from extended family, calmly explaining my side of the story without apologizing for my decision. About a month after the confrontation, my mother requested a meeting. After consulting with Dr. Wilson, I agreed to meet her at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between our homes. When she arrived, I was struck by how tired she looked, the stress of the situation etched in new lines around her eyes. We sat in awkward silence for several minutes before she spoke. "Brandon and Lisa found an apartment," she said finally. "It is smaller than their old place and in a neighborhood they do not like, but at least they are not in our guest room anymore." I nodded but offered no response. "Your father and I had to co-sign the lease and pay the security deposit," she continued, with a pointed look that clearly expected me to feel guilty about this. "That was your choice," I replied calmly, "just as it was my choice how to use my property." She sighed heavily. "I still do not understand why you could not have helped them. They are family, Lyle. Mom, I have been helping Brandon financially for years. Every loan that was never repaid, every time I covered his share of a gift or family expense. The difference is that this time the expectation was not just that I would help, but that I would give up my own home, my investment, without even being consulted." "We would have discussed it with you eventually," she protested weakly. "When? After you had already promised it to Brandon. After his kids had already been told which bedrooms would be theirs, after he had already given notice at his apartment. That is not a discussion, Mom. That is a manipulation." She looked down at her untouched coffee. "We just wanted what was best for everyone." "No," I said gently but firmly. "You wanted what was best for Brandon, at my expense, as always. Did you ever stop to think about what was best for me?" She had no answer for that. The remainder of our meeting was strained, with my mother alternating between attempts to make me feel guilty and awkward efforts to reconnect. I maintained my boundaries, neither apologizing for my decision nor accepting blame for Brandon's housing situation. When we parted, nothing had been resolved, but I felt stronger for having stood my ground without anger or defensiveness. The following weeks brought a gradual shift in family dynamics. Brandon found a job at a warehouse that seemed more stable than his previous positions. My father sent a terse email acknowledging that perhaps they should have approached the situation differently. Extended family members, seeing that I was not going to be shamed into changing my position, gradually stopped their campaign of disapproving messages. My mother continued her efforts to bridge the gap, inviting me to Sunday dinners, which I politely declined, sending small gifts, which I acknowledged with brief thank you notes. I made it clear through my actions that while I was not cutting them off completely, our relationship would need to change fundamentally before we could resume normal interactions. Meanwhile, my living arrangement with Thomas worked surprisingly well. His irregular schedule as a medical resident meant we rarely overlapped in the apartment, and when we did, he was respectful of my space and privacy. Michael and Sarah proved to be ideal tenants in the lower unit, quiet and responsible, always prompt with rent payments. I found unexpected satisfaction in my role as a property owner, addressing maintenance issues, promptly gradually making improvements to both units, and building positive relationships with my tenants. The rental income covered over half my mortgage, allowing me to continue building my savings even faster than before. As the weeks turned into months, I began to build a life independent of my family's expectations and demands. I joined a local hiking group, reconnected with friends I had neglected due to family obligations, and even started dating someone I met through a work conference. The estrangement from my family was painful, particularly during holidays and birthdays, but it also brought a freedom I had never experienced before. For the first time, I was living according to my own values and priorities, rather than contorting myself to fit into the role my family had assigned me. Dr. Wilson helped me understand that this separation, while difficult, was a necessary part of establishing my identity outside the dysfunctional family system. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to break unhealthy patterns, she explained. By refusing to enable Brandon's dependency, you are actually giving him the opportunity to develop his own resources and resilience. I wanted to believe this was true, that my actions might eventually lead to positive changes for everyone. But regardless of how my family responded, I knew I had made the right choice for myself. The duplex represented more than just a financial investment. It was an investment in my independence, my self-respect, and my future. 6 months after the confrontation at my duplex, the sharp edges of family estrangement had begun to soften into a new normal. Brandon, surprisingly, had maintained his warehouse job and even received a promotion to shift supervisor. According to occasional updates from my mother, Lisa had started working part-time at their children's school, providing additional income for their household. They were still living in the smaller apartment, but had begun to adapt to their circumstances, rather than expecting another bailout. My parents had gradually shifted from outright hostility to reluctant acceptance of my decision. My father, never one for emotional conversations, communicated primarily through brief practical texts about family news or neighborhood happenings. My mother continued her efforts to rebuild our relationship, though she still occasionally slipped into guilt-tripping tactics when frustrated by my continued boundaries. The duplex investment had exceeded my financial projections. Both tenants renewed their leases for a second year, sparing me the turnover costs and uncertainty of finding new renters. Property values in the neighborhood had increased by nearly 7%, building my equity faster than anticipated. My arrangement with Thomas continued to work well, giving me the flexibility to stay in my property while still collecting rental income. With my financial situation even more secure, I had begun researching additional real estate investments, considering a small apartment building as my next purchase. The confidence I had gained from standing my ground with my family had spilled over into other areas of my life, leading to more assertiveness at work and a promotion to senior software engineer. My personal life had blossomed as well. Caroline, the woman I had met at the work conference, had become a significant part of my life. Unlike previous relationships where I had often subordinated my needs to others, this relationship felt balanced and healthy, built on mutual respect and clear communication. It was Caroline who encouraged me to attend a large family gathering for my grandmother's 80th birthday. You do not have to re-engage with the old patterns, she advised. But completely cutting yourself off might eventually feel like another form of being controlled by the situation. After careful consideration and consultation with Dr. Wilson, I decided to attend. The party was held at my grandmother's church hall neutral territory that would allow me to leave if things became uncomfortable. I arrived intentionally late to avoid the awkward pre-party family mingling slipping in just as my grandmother was being seated at the head table. The initial reactions to my appearance were predictably tense. Cousins who had sent judgmental texts months ago now avoided eye contact. My father gave a stiff nod of acknowledgement from across the room. Brandon, standing near the punch bowl, visibly stiffened when he spotted me, then deliberately turned his back. My mother, however, rushed over immediately, enveloping me in a tight hug that conveyed both genuine joy at my presence and a desperate hope that my attendance signaled a return to the old family dynamic. I returned the hug but gently disengaged when it went on too long, establishing a subtle boundary even in this greeting. "I am so glad you came," she whispered. "Your grandmother will be thrilled." The event proceeded with less drama than I had anticipated. Family members were civil if somewhat reserved. Brandon kept his distance, which suited me fine. The children, less burdened by adult grudges, greeted their Uncle Lyle with undiminished enthusiasm when they spotted me their innocent affection, a reminder that not all family bonds had been severed by the conflict. Near the end of the celebration, I found myself alone with my father by the coffee urn. After an awkward silence, he cleared his throat. "Your brother seems to be doing better. Keeping this job, being more responsible." I nodded. "That is good to hear." "The apartment situation." He hesitated. "It was difficult at first, but maybe it was what they needed, to stand on their own feet more." Coming from my father, this was as close to an admission of error as I was likely to get. I recognized it as an olive branch of sorts. "Sometimes difficult changes are necessary," I replied, neither accepting blame nor assigning it. He nodded slowly, stirring his coffee with unnecessary focus. "Your mother misses you. We all do." "I have missed aspects of family life too," I acknowledged. But things needed to change. The old patterns were not healthy for any of us. He looked at me, then really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. "You have changed." "I have grown," I corrected gently. "There is a difference." As the party wound down, my grandmother requested a family photo. Standing together for the photographer created a moment of forced proximity with Brandon. As we arranged ourselves by height, he muttered just loudly enough for me to hear, "Nice of you to show your face." Rather than ignoring the comment or responding with hostility, I turned to face him directly. "I came to celebrate Grandma's birthday. If you want to have a real conversation sometime without accusations or guilt trips, I am open to that, but not today, and not like this." The photographer called for smiles, and the moment passed. But something in Brandon's expression suggested my words had registered. Not acceptance, certainly not reconciliation, but perhaps the beginning of recognition that our relationship, if it continued at all, would need to be built on new terms. In the months that followed, I maintained my boundaries, while gradually increasing contact with my family. Sunday dinners were still off the table, but I joined occasional family outings where the structured activity and public setting made it easier to avoid falling into old patterns. I met my mother for lunch every few weeks, ending the meal promptly if she began using emotional manipulation tactics. Brandon and I established a distant but civil relationship, exchanging brief greetings at family events but rarely engaging directly. His improved financial situation seemed to have reduced some of his resentment, though true reconciliation remained a distant possibility at best. My relationship with my duplex evolved as well. As Thomas completed his residency and moved to take a position at another hospital, I reconfigured our arrangement, taking over the entire upper unit while still renting the lower one. The property had become not just a financial investment, but a symbol of my independence and self-determination. The experience had taught me lessons that extended far beyond real estate or family dynamics. I had learned that genuine love includes respect for boundaries, that enabling dependency is not the same as providing support, and that sometimes the healthiest thing you can do for a relationship is to fundamentally change its terms. Most importantly, I had discovered my own capacity for setting boundaries and withstanding disapproval, for choosing long-term well-being over short-term peace. The decision to protect my investment had ultimately been about protecting something far more valuable, my right to shape my own life, according to my own values. As I write this today, 2 years after purchasing the duplex that became a catalyst for so much change, I can say with confidence that standing my ground was worth every difficult moment, every uncomfortable conversation, every pang of guilt. My financial security has grown, but more importantly, so has my sense of self-worth and my ability to form healthier relationships in all areas of my life. If you have ever faced similar pressure from family members who cannot respect your boundaries, I hope my story gives you courage. Setting boundaries is not selfish, it is necessary. Your achievements are yours to celebrate and enjoy, not resources for others to claim without your consent. And sometimes, the family you build through conscious choices and mutual respect will support you better than the one you were born into. I would love to hear about your experiences with family boundaries in the comments. Have you ever had to stand your ground against pressure from loved ones? What helped you stay firm in your decision? Like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need encouragement to protect their own boundaries. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, true family supports your growth, not just their own needs.